The air inside the Kabul Forward Operating Base felt heavy, almost like it was holding its breath. For weeks, the mountains had been swallowing patrols whole. Ambushes seemed to lurk around every turn, and Marines came back bloodied. Or sometimes they didn't come back at all. My boots thudded against the plywood floor of the operations tent, steady, measured, trying to keep some sort of rhythm in the tension. Gunnery Sergeant Elena Torres walked in. She was small, quiet, unassuming. Nothing about her screamed the kind of legend people whispered about in the dark. Marines lifted their eyes from their maps, taking in this unremarkable figure. A group of Navy SEALs slouched in their chairs, smirking, whispering under their breath. That her? Really? That's the one everyone's talking about? A low laugh snaked around the table. To them, she was just another Marine. Too lean, too quiet, too ordinary to be anything more. At the far end, General Marcus Steele straightened in his chair. His chest was covered in ribbons, and his voice alone could break a man long before battle did. He had heard the same rumors. But Steele didn't put stock in rumors. He trusted results. And the quiet woman standing before him didn't look like a result anyone would bet on. The room started to fidget, laughter mixing with doubt. Whispers skittered through the air like static. That's supposed to be the one they call something? The words hung there, unfinished. The call sign was left unsaid. Steele's eyes narrowed. He was old school. He hated legends. General Marcus Steele had been in the Army for over 30 years. He could read a room the way a sniper reads the wind, and what he saw now made him uneasy. The second Gunnery Sergeant Elena Torres crossed into the tent, something shifted. It wasn't her stride, or the way she carried herself. It was the way everyone around her reacted. The Marines froze, mid-conversation, the chatter fading. Even the cocky, unshakable Navy SEALs went quiet long enough to steal a glance her way. That glance alone told Steele everything he needed to know. He had a hate for whispers. Rumors grated on him too. But above all, he despised legends he couldn't control. A legend made soldiers chase ghosts, and ghosts had a way of getting men killed. Steele pushed back from the briefing table, the soles of his boots striking the plywood floor with authority. Instantly, the tent went quiet. His eyes locked on Torres, sharp and unyielding. "You," he barked, his voice carrying the weight of command, the kind that didn't ask twice. "Step forward." Without a hint of hesitation, Torres stepped up. Every eye in the tent followed her, curiosity pressing down like a heavy weight. She looked smaller than most, leaner too, but there was a certain steel in her stance, shoulders squared, eyes steady, that refused to break. "Name, unit." Steele's words cut through the air like a knife, leaving no room for hesitation. Torres responded, calm and steady, without a tremor in her voice. "Gunnery Sergeant Elena Torres. First Recon, sir." Textbook. Crisp. Exactly what he expected. And yet, it didn't satisfy him. He had heard the whispers from the field, stories of a Marine who never missed her mark, who moved through chaos unseen, who dragged squads back from the edge of disaster. It set his blood on fire. Soldiers were supposed to fear their enemies, not worship their own. Steele stepped closer, casting his shadow over her face. His jaw tensed, and the corner of his mouth twitched into the faintest scowl. "Not good enough," he said quietly, but the whole tent heard. Then, sharper this time, "Call sign." The effect was immediate. The tent seemed to hold its breath. Marines exchanged uneasy glances. A Navy SEAL shifted in his chair, the scrape of his boots against the floor sounding louder than it should. Weeks of whispers and rumors crashed into this single, impossible moment. Everyone knew what was coming. Everyone wanted to hear it. And everyone was secretly afraid of it. Torres didn't blink. She didn't fidget. Her face stayed calm, almost detached, like she had run through this exact confrontation in her mind 100 times. She lifted her chin just enough to meet Steele's stare, steady and unflinching. Her voice came out clear, even, stripped of ego or bravado. "Spectre 6. The words cut through the tent like a knife slicing through canvas. The silence that followed was thick, heavy, total. Even General Steele didn't speak for a moment. He had seen that call sign before, buried in classified reports, stamped and filed away where only a few eyes would ever see them. At the time, he had dismissed it, just soldiers spinning tales, myths built to explain survival. But now, looking at her, the myth had a face, a uniform, and eyes that refused to break under pressure. Around the room, Marines shifted nervously. The SEALs sat straighter in their chairs. The smirks had vanished. The laughter was gone. All that remained was the weight of two words. Spectre 6. And from that moment, nobody doubted it. Her words hung in the air, heavy as smoke, echoing in the minds of everyone present. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The tense previous laughter, the easy confidence, it had all disappeared. Even the SEALs, men who had walked through fire and thought themselves untouchable, were frozen in place. One of the loudest, who had been leaning back casually just minutes ago, now sat upright, hands gripping his knees, jaw locked tight. Across the table, the junior officers exchanged uneasy glances. They had seen pieces of the after-action reports, the ones never meant to leave secure channels. Reports of a Marine who vanished into Kabul's alleyways, only to show up behind enemy lines. A Marine who turned hopeless firefights into clean, precise victories. But every single one of those reports had carried the same word, unverified. Now, the source of all those whispers was standing right there, breathing the same air, and the weight of it settled on everyone in the room. General Steele's expression didn't soften. If anything, it grew harder. He had survived more campaigns than he could count, had watched heroes rise and fall in the span of a single night. Myths weren't something he trusted. He hated it when soldiers built them out of flesh and blood. But the call sign cut through all that skepticism. He had heard it before, in classified chatter, in reports delivered behind locked doors, in hushed whispers that made even the most seasoned men speak quietly. Spectre 6, Steele muttered slowly, almost to himself. The words tasted like iron on his tongue. The tent was silent, heavy as stone. The Marines who had laughed quietly just minutes ago shifted in their seats, avoiding her eyes. No one dared to laugh. No one dared to whisper. They all felt it, the moment when a rumor became reality. Torres stood still, calm, neither proud nor defensive. She gave nothing more. She had said her name. That was enough. Finally, one SEAL broke the silence. He muttered under his breath, quiet enough that Steele didn't hear, but loud enough for the others to catch. No wonder they're alive. The words spread like sparks across dry grass. Men remembered the missions gone sideways in Kabul, the ones where units trapped under fire somehow clawed their way back without losing a single soul. Those stories had always sounded like exaggeration, a way for Marines to soothe themselves after chaos. But now, seeing her standing there, everything clicked. But now, the men who had heard the stories realized the heart of them was standing right in front of them. General Steele's gaze drilled into her, searching for cracks, for weakness. He found none. Behind her eyes burned a quiet fire, not arrogance, not bravado, but certainty. And for the first time in decades of service, Steele felt a twinge of unease. When he finally spoke, his voice dropped low, but it carried farther than any bark of command ever could. I hope, Sergeant, that name isn't just smoke. Torres met his stare without a flicker. It isn't, sir. Silence returned. But this time, it wasn't mocking. It was heavy, raw respect, the kind that can't be demanded, only earned. Weeks before that tense briefing, the streets of Kabul had already written her legend. It was supposed to be a routine patrol. Narrow alleys, dust rising from cracked stones, children watching from doorways with eyes that betrayed nothing. Gunnery Sergeant Elena Torres led the way, rifle steady, instincts sharp. But she didn't like the silence. In Kabul, silence was never safe. The trap snapped shut without warning. Gunfire erupted from the rooftops, shattering windows and throwing the street into chaos. Marines dove behind broken walls and burnt-out vehicles. Shouts crackled over the comms. Man down. We've got wounded. Rounds slammed into stone just inches from Torres's head, spattering grit across her face. Her squad was pinned, bleeding, trapped in a kill zone with no way forward. Enemy fighters had every angle covered. Rooftops, side alleys, hidden doorways. Torres pressed flat against the rubble. Her heart stayed steady, her mind narrowed. Panic swirled around her, but she didn't let it take hold. She scanned the chaos, noting how the fire patterns overlapped, searching for the gaps that weren't covered. There, a blind spot. A way through if she was willing to crawl across broken glass to reach it. Without hesitation, she slipped from cover, dragging herself low through the debris, crawling through dust and blood, inch by inch. Bullets hissed past, so close she could feel the heat snap past her cheek. Every move was deliberate, every breath calculated. She slipped into the shadows of a collapsed wall, weaving wide through a maze of back alleys, and emerged behind the first rooftop team. One squeeze of the trigger, precise, controlled, and the threat was gone. Another, and another. Each shot ended danger before it could strike. She moved like smoke, never lingering long enough to be spotted, a shadow twisting through the maze of brick, cobble, and dust. 12 enemy firing points fell in order, each shot precise, each threat eliminated before anyone realized she was there. Back in the kill zone, the Marines felt the pressure ease. The gunfire that had pinned them faltered. Confusion rippled through the enemy ranks. Marines lifted their heads, sensing space to move. Push forward. Move. Someone shouted. And for the first time that day, the squad surged ahead. When Torres returned to them, her rifle was still warm, her uniform streaked with dust and sweat. She said nothing. She didn't have to. Every man in that alley knew who had pulled them out of the fire. Not a single Marine had been left behind. Not one. Later, when the reports made their way up the chain, officers debated what had happened. Some chalked it up to luck, others to exaggeration. But the Marines who had been there knew the truth. Her call sign began to whisper through mess halls and convoy lines, spreading from squad to squad. Spectre 6. The name of the Marine who crawled through hell and brought everyone home. The operations tent still carried the echo of it. Spectre 6. The men who had mocked her minutes ago now avoided her gaze. The silence wasn't just quiet. It was reverence. And General Marcus Steele felt it like a storm pressing against him. He leaned his fists on the table, the maps under his knuckles creasing beneath the pressure. His eyes fixed on Torres, sharp, unyielding, demanding. He had seen reputations rise too fast before. Men crushed under names they could never live up to. Legends were dangerous. They made soldiers reckless, convinced them someone was untouchable. And when that myth shattered, Marines died. Steele straightened, boots thudding against the floor as he closed the space between them. He stopped just short of her, eyes locked, voice cutting through the tent. "You understand what you've just done, Sergeant?" Torres stood at attention, shoulders squared, chin lifted just slightly. "Yes, sir." His jaw tightened. "Legends break men. Marines will expect you to be unbreakable," Steele said, his voice cutting through the tent. "They'll believe you can't fall, and if you do, they'll fall with you." The words hung in the air, sharp, meant to get under her armor. Around the tent, Marines shifted in their seats. SEALs leaned forward, silent but alert. No one dared speak, yet every man listened. Torres didn't blink. Her breathing stayed steady. Her eyes didn't waver. She'd faced fear dressed as warnings before, lived under it every time bullets cracked past her helmet in Kabul's narrow alleys. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, but it carried steel. "Then I won't break, sir." The tent went still again, heavier than before. Even the hum of the generator outside seemed to fade. For a long moment, General Steele said nothing. He studied her like a battlefield commander studies terrain, searching for weaknesses, hidden fractures, any sign of bluff. But what stared back at him wasn't arrogance. It wasn't bravado. It was calm certainty, the kind forged in fire and sharpened by survival. One of the younger officers glanced nervously at Steele, as if expecting him to strike her down for insolence. Instead, Steele exhaled through his nose, slow, measured. "You think it's that simple," he said, the edge in his voice softer now. "You think it's just about not breaking." Torres didn't flinch. "I don't think, sir. I know. My Marines are alive because I don't." The words hit the room like a thunderclap, blunt, stripped of ego, undeniable. The SEAL who had laughed earlier lowered his gaze. A captain at the table pressed his lips together, suddenly aware that the weight of the myth had just been matched by reality. Steele's expression shifted, almost imperceptibly. The skepticism remained, but beneath it, something else flickered. Recognition. Respect. Reluctant, but real. He stepped back, voice quieter now, yet carrying farther than before. "Very well, Spectre 6. No one moved. No one spoke. The legend was no longer just a whisper. In that tent, under the steady gaze of General Steele himself, it had been acknowledged. Respect had shifted. Permanently. The silence hadn't yet lifted when the flap of the tent snapped open. A young lieutenant hurried inside, clutching a folder tight under his arm, face pale under the harsh fluorescent lights. Without a word, he placed the papers in front of Steele. Steele scanned the report, jaw tightening with each line. Then he looked up, eyes narrowing as they swept across the room. "Recon Bravo's gone dark," he said, calm, even, but the weight of those words sank instantly into every chest. "Last contact, 20 minutes ago. Outskirts of Kabul. No comms. No movement. High chance of ambush." A ripple of unease ran through the gathered Marines and SEALs. Everyone knew exactly what that meant. A silent unit on Kabul's outskirts wasn't just lost, it was surrounded. Steele's gaze shifted deliberately to Torres. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Sergeant Torres, you're on point." The words hit like a hammer. A few SEALs exchanged quick, uneasy glances. Their earlier mockery had evaporated, replaced by something heavier. They had seen her face the general without flinching, but this was different. This wasn't rumor. This wasn't briefing room bravado. This was real, written in blood and dust. Torres didn't hesitate. "Yes, sir," she said, adjusting the strap of her rifle. She stepped forward with the calm precision of someone preparing for another long, grueling march. Around her, boots scraped and rifles clicked as Marines and SEALs fell into formation. Doubt lingered in some eyes, but so did curiosity, a grudging respect that had started in the tent and now followed her into the night. Outside, Kabul was alive with tension. The city hummed faintly in the distance, but the outskirts were dark, quiet, dangerous, each broken wall hiding unseen threats. The convoy moved out under the glow of red lights, tires crunching over gravel, engines kept low to avoid drawing attention. Inside the armored vehicle, no one spoke. Torres sat near the door, helmet tipped slightly forward, eyes closed for a moment of stillness. To anyone watching, it looked like calm. To her, it was calculation. Every pattern of enemy fire she had studied, every blind spot she had crawled through, the rhythm of ambushes in Kabul's alleys. She ran it all silently in her mind, mapping the danger before she even stepped outside. When they reached the outskirts, Steele's voice crackled over the radio. "Spectre 6, lead them in." Torres signaled her team forward. They dismounted. Boots hit dirt, rifles raised. The alleys yawned ahead, dark and suffocating. A lone dog barked in the distance, then the night swallowed the sound. The SEAL nearest her whispered, "Feels like a trap." Torres didn't respond. She lifted a hand, signaling a halt. Her eyes swept the rooftops, the shadows, the cracked windows that seemed too quiet. She felt it, the shift in the air, the invisible weight of watching eyes. "Positions," she said softly, her voice cutting through the comms with steady authority. The Marines and SEALs moved, trusting her judgment more than their own nerves. Then, as if the night itself had waited for the signal, it erupted. Gunfire cracked across the alleys. A Marine went down hard, dragged behind cover by his brothers as rounds slammed into stone around them. The storm broke. Shots rained from rooftops, windows, narrow alleys that funneled death into the convoy. "Contact, snipers left," shouted a SEAL, his voice nearly lost in the roar of automatic fire. Marines pressed into the dirt, trapped in the choke of the cobbled streets. Smoke and dust filled the air, comms alive with frantic voices. Every rooftop seemed alive with muzzle flashes. The sharp angles of the city turned against them. Hind, exposed. Nowhere to go. But Torres didn't falter. She pressed her back against a shattered wall, breathing even, unshaken. Her eyes swept the battlefield, reading it like a mapmaker reads terrain. Angles, blind spots, timing. Every variable accounted for. There it was, a damaged wall, half collapsed, just enough to grab onto and climb. While the others fired blindly below, she moved. "Cover me," Torres ordered, her voice slicing through the chaos like a blade. No one hesitated. Fire shifted, opening the window she needed. Boots slamming against broken stone, she sprinted low, then began to climb. One hand, then the next, body moving with precise control despite rounds snapping dangerously close. She reached the rooftop edge, rolled over silently, and emerged behind the first sniper team. Her rifle barked once, clean, surgical. The shooter went down before he even knew what hit him. She didn't pause. She flowed to the next position, vanishing into shadows and reappearing like smoke on the wind. Each shot dropped another enemy, methodical, exact. Below, the Marines felt the pressure ease. The fire that had trapped them seconds before faltered. A SEAL glanced up, eyes wide, catching sight of Torres. Steady, focused, striking from above as if the city itself had cleared a path for her. "She's clearing them," he muttered under his breath, disbelief in his voice. One by one, rooftops went silent under her precision. Escape routes opened like doors unlocking. "Move, push left," a Marine shouted, seizing the moment. The squad surged, dragging the wounded, rifles snapping to cover gaps that had seemed impassable only moments ago. From above, Torres laid down measured fire, each round carving a path for her team. There was no panic in her movements, no wasted shots. Every bullet meant freedom. Every bullet meant life. By the time the last rooftop fell quiet, the convoy remained intact. Every Marine was alive, bloodied, shaken, but alive. Torres climbed back down, boots hitting the dust, rifle still warm. She said nothing as she slipped back into formation, as if she hadn't just changed the course of the fight single-handedly. The SEALs stared, smirks replaced by stunned silence. One muttered under his breath, almost to himself, "That's not rumor. That's real." In that moment, the legend of Spectre 6 stopped being a whisper. It became undeniable truth. The convoy rolled back toward base under dim floodlights, dust clinging to uniforms, the smell of gunpowder hanging thick in the air. Medics rushed forward, tending to the wounded. But the truth weighed heaviest in every chest. Every Marine had made it back alive. Every man had walked out of that ambush breathing. Back inside the operations tent, the air felt different. The same SEALs who had laughed at Torres now leaned quietly against the walls, faces unreadable. The Marines who had doubted her moved stiffly, like men standing before something larger than themselves. At the head of the table, General Marcus Steele waited, arms crossed, ribbons gleaming under the harsh lights. When Torres entered, boots striking the plywood floor, the room went completely silent. No one whispered. Steele's gaze lingered on her, hard, assessing, but no longer skeptical. He had seen enough to silence doubt. When he finally spoke, the tent leaned in. "Spectre 6, he said, each word deliberate, weighted with meaning. "You kept every man alive today." He didn't give a speech. He didn't raise his voice. Instead, he offered the smallest nod, and from a man like Steele, that nod carried more than medals, more than ribbons. It carried respect, forged in fire and earned in blood. The room froze. SEALs who prided themselves on being unshakable stayed silent. Marines who had mocked her now stared, careful not to break the moment. For a heartbeat, it felt like time itself had bowed. Torres didn't flinch. She didn't smile. She saluted, crisp, steady. The general returned it, sharp and short. Nothing more needed to be said. That night, the name spread faster than any radio signal could. Across Kabul, in chow halls, guard posts, and barracks, Marines whispered it with a new certainty. Spectre 6 wasn't a rumor anymore. She was real. Young recruits, fresh off the line, began carving S6 into helmets, rifle stocks, scraps of paper tucked into pockets like talismans. Veterans nodded quietly, passing the story down without embellishment this time. A Marine who had taken rooftops alone and brought an entire unit home alive. Later, outside the barracks, Torres sat on a sandbag wall beneath the Kabul night sky. The stars stretched wide overhead, the same ones she had seen 1,000 nights before. She ran a cloth over her rifle, slow, almost meditative. She didn't bask in the whispers. She didn't chase the legend. All she thought about was the men who had made it back because of what happened in those alleys. Her voice was low, meant only for herself and the stars. "As long as they come home," she whispered. "The name is worth it." The wind carried her words into the darkness. Somewhere in the distance, laughter drifted from a barracks window. Marines alive because of her. Spectre 6 wasn't just a call sign anymore. It was a legacy.